This is the Rebel HR Podcast, the podcast about all things innovation in the people space. I'm Kyle Rode. Let's start the show. Welcome back, Rebel HR community. This is going to be a fun one today. With us, we have an amazing guest, Diane Allen. She is a flow state thought leader, a violinist, and an author of the book that is available now. The book is named Flow, Unlock Your Genius, Love What You Do. Diane, thank you so much for joining us. Really excited for the conversation. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, fellow rebeler.
I love it. And you know, before I hit record, we were just talking. Like I saw your note come in. You know, just asking about the podcast. I'm like, oh my gosh, we have to talk. We have to do this. So thank you for carving out the time in your busy schedule. I want to start off with the question that I ask almost every author, and that is, what motivated you to invest the time, energy, and in some cases, heartburn of writing and publishing your own book?
Oh, my.
Loaded question.
Yeah. I do a lot of professional speaking, and a part of being a professional speaker is, well, you need to have a book. And it's one of those things that I knew I had a book in me. I just had to sit down and write it. I met somebody who really inspired me to write the book. And she was saying, yeah, you got to just do 250 words a day. And I was like, that doesn't work, Diane Allen. I knew how I get into flow already. So I was like, yeah, no, 250 words a day. That sounds like red light, green light, red light, green light. I sat down last 2 weeks of December in 2023, and I just wrote it. That's all I did. We are low-key holiday people, so it was perfect time. It was quiet. And I just pounded it out. I knew that I didn't have to do a lot of research. It was already what was within me. That was the easy part. The hard part was working with the editor and the layout person, because we had really high standards. Really high standards. Like, I had no idea how important the layout of a book is to make it readable. Had no idea. And if you think about in music, like, we have form in music, right? And that's kind of what keeps things together, right? In the workplace, we have guardrails, right? And, if it's just always a free for all, sometimes those guardrails really help to hone ideas, right? And I had no idea, how much the layout of the book, we worked really hard on that. We had almost 20 different versions of the cover. We worked really hard on it. But I had pre-sold the book to Alaska Sherm for their conference that we just did in late October 2024. And it was so exciting to be there. 300 people received my book with a wonderful sponsor, and they paid for the books. And it was just the most incredibly rewarding experience now that all the hard work is over.
I love it. So as a fellow musician, and I use air quotes when I say that, compared to your experience, and I think it's just such a corollary experience to songwriting, right? Where you put your heart and soul and your creative energy into something that means so much to you, but then you have to go through the work of crafting, right? And it's rewriting, and you open yourself up, that really vulnerable, right? Because you're essentially you're writing your truth down, and then you're opening yourself up to these external influences to try to put it into something that's palatable for a general audience, right? So
there's a contributor to my book. She was a Yale law professor for, I think, 30 years. And I met her. I did a masterclass for a group of amateur musicians, and she was one of those people. And part of the masterclass was learning, what is your flow state? How do you get into it? How can it help you as a musician? And she contacted me and she said, Diane, I have had this complete flashback over my entire career. I could see how flow kept me afloat throughout all of the hardships that I dealt with without, compromising, and not compromising her quality, but actually flow helped her to enhance her quality. As you imagine, a Yale Law professor has to be at the top of their game all the time. And she said that flow was always the answer. So she was able to write this beautiful letter that we included in the book that really, really highlighted practical application of being in the flow state. And she said that she had written 2 books herself in her career. She's now retired. And she said, boy, if I hadn't done that, it would have been as if I never did the work. Because we have a solid, tangible thing, it's like I was there. I did it. This is it, right? And as I was nearing the end of the entire process, I had that same feeling like, oh my goodness, look at this. It is a tangible thing. It is here. There's something very emotional about it. But thank you for asking.
I get it. No, I get it. And I think so. What fascinates me about individuals like yourself that take these nebulous ideas and this creativity and this body of work, and I'm assuming which is kind of in your lifetime,
yes,
of work, and then to put that into something that is tangible and that can be shared with others. I think there's such power in that, and I think it's same comment on musicians, authors, speakers, and people like yourselves. And I'm curious, as you've done this work and as you've done done the research and teaching on flow state, what are the things that excite you the most about this work? What keeps you coming back day in and day out to do this?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. So first of all, we have to circle back to that word nebulous, because the entire thought leadership that I have on flow state is to take something that seems nebulous and makes it into a very, very useful tool. And to be able to share that with people is what keeps me coming back. I just mentioned that I recently came back from Alaska. There was a gentleman in the audience who, I don't know exactly what his role is, but he sees a lot of the data in the fishing industry. Okay. These are people who have to wash the fish, right? The fish is coming off the boat. They're washing the fish. Then you get these people who are doing this aggressive smashing process, very, very physical work. And he said that the people who have the most mundane job, okay, which is the people who are washing the fish, they have the highest rate of injuries. And everything that we talked about what the flow state is, how do you trigger it? How do you activate it within yourself? He realized that's what's been missing for these people, because there's nothing that they're connecting with. They are completely disengaged. They are just like a machine. There's no skill necessary. And the thing about flow is it is not a mindset. It is a mind state. It's an optimal state of mind when people feel their best and they perform their best. I like to describe it when your genius and your heart become one. And the neuroscience of flow is such that it optimizes our brain. So there are a number of peak performance hormones that get released when we're in flow. Anandamide, endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. And because of this, we experience euphoria, motivation, peak performance, and happiness. And so when people are in flow, they're oftentimes at the psychologists. So flow falls under the umbrella of positive psychology. The first psychologist who did extensive research into flow. His name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And he's got a lot of different ideas about how to get into flow. One of the ones that I have used frequently at different conferences and events with HR professionals is the skill, challenge, purpose model. So if you just got to think about a Venn diagram, 3 circles: skill, challenge, purpose. Okay. And so if we take a look at these people who are washing fish, okay, not much skill necessary. Okay. Not much challenge happening and not much purpose going on either. Right. And so if you remove purpose for a second, you've got a skill. If you have a skill, but it's not challenged, nothing is going to ignite. If you have it challenged without a skill, nothing is going to ignite. It's the two together that ignites flow and brings out the best in people. And when you add purpose to it, it just takes it to a whole new level. Yeah. So this gentleman in Alaska, looking at how can we lower the rate of these injuries with the people who wash fish, he's like, the answer is in this model. He's like, I see it. He couldn't quite put his finger on it. He said, I'm thinking we need to gamify it. We need to increase their skill. We need to give them a challenge. Maybe find a personal purpose. Like he could tell that there was something there that would help him to flip the switch for these people so that they can be less injured. The last thing I'll share with his story is that he said that the people who are doing like all the smashing and all like the heavy physical work, sweating and, like really heavy physical work, he said they actually have less injuries than the people just washing the fish. And it's because they have their whole self involved in some way. And I imagine that that physicality and the other piece he said was that there was a feedback mechanism. They could see in front of them the results of their work. They could see, the pounding and how it accumulated into however they capture the fish.
Interesting.
Amazing, right?
Yeah. Cute. I'm just like envisioning like Deadliest Catch and the Bon Jovi theme song and all of this. You could have some fun with this, but I want to go back to something you said that it's not a mindset, it's a mind state. And I think so often you see these or you hear these or get advice that like you just need to get in the right mindset. You need to get in the right frame of mind, or you need to like coach yourself into a flow state. So are you saying that that's not really the case, that the flow state is more it's more of a state of mind versus trying to like coach yourself or convince yourself to get, quote, into flow?
Correct. So let me just finish like kind of going through like what exactly is flow, right? Because I've already talked about the neuroscience of it. When we say go with the flow, that's a mind state. And usually people are just saying, just relax, like, roll with it, that kind of thing. And when you are in flow, a lot of people do describe it as that feeling of just, relaxing and going with it. But it's different because I already mentioned mindset. Okay. When you think about going with the flow as a mindset, that is passive. But when you are in flow, it is actually active. I already mentioned at the intersection of skill, challenge, and purpose. That's what ignites flow. That is very action-based. Okay. So the key indicators of being in flow, let me re-say that again. The key indicators of being in flow help people to realize when they're in it. A lot of times people don't realize that they're in flow until they're out of flow. And it's not until they're out of flow that they realize the benefits of being in it. So how do you know then, right? Well, you do lose sense of time. And it's because you just love what you're doing. I know you've experienced that, right?
Yeah.
You lose a sense of self, which is a really kind of funny thing to say. Like, what does that mean, losing a sense of self? And, if we go a little bit deeper into the neurobiology of flow, it's because there are things that get turned on in your brain. There are things that get turned off. And the peak performance hormones that get turned on, I already mentioned, right? But the thing that gets turned off in your brain is your fight or flight response and your inner critic. Your inner critic is gone. And so people feel uninhibited and they feel fearless. And when they're in that moment, a lot of ideas and insights come in from out of the blue because we're not filtering them. Ideas and insights coming in from out of the blue is another key indicator of being in flow. Things coming together with a sense of ease. Kyle, have you ever gotten more done in 30 minutes than you had in the last 3 days? Okay.
Not right? If my boss asks. No, never had that happen. I'm always super productive, but
that's so funny. So that's a great example. And I usually do get a chuckle when I say that one because a lot of people experience that. And that is being in flow. Okay. And it does seem nebulous and elusive. Couple more key indicators. Instead of being in a negative feedback loop, kind of like the people washing fish, right? Where you have to use willpower, right? And discipline to do the work that drains you. And then you have to recover at the end of the day, right? And you get into this negative feedback loop. When you're in flow, it is so rewarding that it refuels you and you get into a positive feedback loop. And the positive feedback loop is, to understand that is one thing, but its impact on mental health is something that Adam Grant, organizational psychologist, really highlighted, especially during the pandemic. He wrote an article in the New York Times. He gave a TED Talk on this very topic. And he talked about the mental health. He talked about the mental health spectrum and how halfway between depression and flourishing, this is midway point where you're fine, but you're not fine. You're functional, but you can't get motivated. You're just kind of blah. And so according to Adam Grant, the antidote to go from languishing to flourishing is to get into your flow state.
Absolutely. And I think, I love, and I read the languishing, and certainly experienced that myself in, sitting at home, watching COVID cases light up around the world. But, I think it's fascinating. So, and this goes back to, the fight or flight inner critic being shut off. And, so much of that research on the brain is that fight or flight, it shuts off creativity because it's all about your body trying to like save yourself.
Yep.
It's old wiring from, caveman days that isn't necessarily effective in the current world that we operate in as human beings. And, but I mean, I'm sure many of us can reflect on the times when it's almost like you let go, right? And, or you're in a situation where it's like, okay, I give it up to the universe or God or whatever, and I'm just going to let, and then stuff starts to happen, right? Like you do you get that spark of creativity, or you find some joyful aspect of your life that you were kind of, missing before. And you hear these stories. And I think many of us have experienced that. My question go ahead.
That's my claim to fame is like, how can we take that and make it real in our lives? Right.
Right.
And so I'm holding up a picture of the orchestra I used to play in. So I was the lead violinist, the concert master of an orchestra for 15 years. Okay. That's second in command to the conductor. And it didn't matter how I showed up that day. However I showed up, that was going to have a ripple effect throughout the orchestra and the audience. Because I also was kind of like part of my role was it was all nonverbal communication, but I did also interact with the audience. Okay, so it's just not just the orchestra, right? So I had to be at the top of my game. I always had to show up, and people expect musicians to get into the music, right? We're not going to be disengaged employees on a stage because nobody would come to the concert.
Right. You're literally on stage.
Literally on stage. And you're expected to get into the music because that creates a transformational experience for everyone, right?
Yeah. So I think, I'll make a comment on that. So not many people know this, but I used to play cello in orchestra like back in school. So I'm nowhere near your accomplishment, but I will tell to the listeners the lead violinist is a big freaking deal, and everybody in the orchestra has to follow the energy and the down to the way that the bow is being moved across the violin, because that's all part of the performance. It's part of the energy of the music, and you're not just watching the conductor, you're watching that lead violinist, because they set the tone. So it's very similar to like a workplace where you've got like a line leader or a line manager that's like they're taking what the CEO says and they're actually deploying it throughout the workplace. That's how I would describe that for those that aren't like orchestra nerds like me.
I am going to get that clip because you're the first person that like I've ever had a conversation with that we're recording that could actually articulate exactly this. And I like to describe it as like if the conductor is the CEO, I'm basically interpreting what the conductor is doing to make it accessible for the orchestra members.
We'll be back after a quick break.
If you're a private practice owner, here's why you want to hire virtual assistants. Virtual assistants not only can perform all of the non-clinical responsibilities by supporting or replacing your current team, but they can do it at a fraction of the cost, all while improving the patient care experience. Virtual Rockstar was created for private practice owners by a private practice owner who wants to help you gain greater profitability and freedom. We'll teach you how to work with virtual assistants, all while helping bring a family out of poverty. Visit www.virtualrockstar.com today to learn more and book your free discovery call at www.virtualrockstar.com.
Right, because the orchestra, you're watching the nonverbal mannerisms of everybody around you, especially that lead violin, because you're also looking at the music and you don't have all the music memorized. So you're watching like 6 different inputs at the same time. And so much of it, you're actually intuitively understanding the energy that's coming at you from everybody else around you. So it's a very like organic, it's hard to explain. Like it's really hard for me to explain it verbally, but that's what it's like. It's like you're actually sensing the energy around you. That's what that's kind of what it's feeling. That's why I love it. That's what I loved about it, right? Like it's such a cool experience, right?
So because I do speak for a lot of leadership events, when you are getting into the music, when you are getting into your work, like a musician gets into the music, I don't care if you're washing fish, you're cutting pipe, or you're having a high-end brainstorming meeting to revolutionize whatever, right? There is an energy there. Mm-hmm. Maybe it looks like enthusiasm. Maybe it looks like your friend who on Friday night has like this thing where every Friday night they make homemade pizza. That's like, they talk about it all week. They're excited about it all week. Maybe one week they invite you over. You're not so into pizza, but for some reason you're there. You can't get, you get caught up in the enthusiasm. So flow is basically the energy of enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. And according to the Heart Math Institute, okay, when you are in flow, you are using your signature strengths, okay? We have to go into how people get into flow, because when you get into how people get into flow, you are identifying their signature strengths, but you're also identifying purpose, okay? And when you are coming from a place, whether you're getting into the music, making those pizzas, washing fish, or getting into your job, maybe it's that Excel spreadsheet where you lose all sense of time, okay? Because you just love what you're doing, that you're igniting the 40,000 neurons in your heart. And according to the Heart Math Institute, the electromagnetic field of the heart reaches out 60% greater than the brain's electromagnetic field. And it reaches out 3 feet all around you, which means everybody around you senses your energy. Now, all those people sync up to you. Now they're exuding 3-foot circles. This is literally the energetics of a ripple effect. And so as I'm leading the orchestra non-verbally, I'm doing it all energetically. I trigger it by leading myself to get into flow. If I could lead myself to get into flow, I could lead others to get into theirs. And when you have a large group of people, whether it's 3 people or more, the hundreds, between the orchestra and the audience, you're igniting a synergistic state of group flow.
Mm. Love it. So there is real science to this energy woo-woo stuff we all talk about.
Yes. Okay, listen, we have to make the most of our time here. So Kyle and I were having a conversation before we started recording. He said, I get into the music all the time. I get into flow when I'm in my music. I'd like to experience that more at work. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I want to do is walk Kyle through figuring that out. And I'm going to use 3 questions. So these are the 3 questions. Basically, just to give like a really quick background, I had a day where I couldn't get into the music, freaked me out. That night, I sat on the couch, literally like humiliated, because I felt like, okay, now my job security and my reputation are at stake, because I played a concert where I was going through the motions and I was very visible in that concert. It was not good.
Mm.
So if only everyone were as conscientious as a musician about being engaged in their work, right?
Right.
Like
right.
You have to be, right? So the that night is the night that was my defining moment where my thought leadership, was born. Like what was I doing? Okay. So the first question is, okay, we're gonna use the 3 prompts that I came up with that night to help Kyle figure out. Well, first we're gonna just figure out how do you uniquely get into flow when you're either writing music or playing music. Okay. So the first question is just where? Just locate it. Where are you?
Like where am I when I hit that state?
No, yeah, like for me, like if I'm practicing, I'm here in my room, right?
Yeah.
So like where are you? Do you have a location?
Yeah, I'm usually in the living room, looking out the window. Like I have some picture of nature somewhere.
Okay.
Somehow.
Those are great details. Okay. So he just described where he was in the environment. Okay. What are you doing? This is like, for me, I'm playing the violin, right? It's just as basic as that, right? Yeah. So what are you doing?
Yeah.
You can pick either playing or writing music. Which one do you feel has more juice in it?
Playing. Yeah, playing guitar.
So you're playing guitar. That's what you're doing on the outside. Okay. Yeah. So the first question is, where are you? Second question is, what are you doing? But there's a 2-part question here. What are you doing on the outside? You're playing guitar. What are you doing on the inside? I'm going to give you a couple examples, okay? Let's say where you are is in your office. What you're doing on the outside is working on an Excel spreadsheet. What you're doing on the inside could be any number of things. You could be problem solving. You could be strategizing. You could be visualizing, right? A lot of different things. So when you think about what are you doing when you're playing the guitar, what are you doing on the inside? What is that for you?
Well, this is interesting. So for me, it's completing it's connecting the dots between the patterns that I hear in my head or like visually see somehow, and making that come out of the guitar.
Connecting the dots.
That's a good way to say it. It's like taking a known pattern and making something new with it. I guess that's how I would describe that.
Yeah, that means something to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is what we're talking about when we talk about what makes people tick. What's their signature strength, right? What's their secret sauce? For you, it's connecting the dots. That's it. Okay. That's your unique way. Okay. Or what you're doing. Okay. Now, the last question is another, we've heard this question a zillion times. Why? Okay. Why is connecting the dots so meaningful? Do you want me to give you an example first?
Sure.
Let's go back to the spreadsheet, right? Where somebody is in their office. What they're doing on the outside is working on an Excel spreadsheet. What they're doing on the inside, let's say they're problem solving. Why is that problem solving so meaningful? And they might say, well, it's because, when you solve the problem, it's just, it's a big relief, right? And I get to contribute, right? So then you could say, well, why is that important? Well, solving the problem and contributing, that's being of service. And if they really light up, like that's like a really important thing in their life, is to be of service. Okay. So we're looking usually when I'm talking about why, I'm looking for, those really, really lofty ideals that we strive for. They're things that are so much bigger than ourselves that pull us forward, like well-being and equality and peace and love and joy and freedom, all of those kinds of, concepts. So when you're thinking of connecting the dots, why is that so meaningful?
I would say, so for me, it's two reasons. Number one, it's an authentic expression of myself and what I'm feeling. So it's that aspect, and it helps me make sense of the world. Right, it just helps me understand what and why is just what's happening. There's so much out there.
So the authentic expression of yourself could be freedom of.
Yeah, freedom of. I would say freedom of thought, freedom of expression. As a man, the opportunity to express emotion without judgment. Right. So there's some of that. I'm sure there's some, my therapist can unpack that later.
Yeah. So we'll put that under the freedom umbrella.
Yeah.
And then your other thing, say what it is again.
Yeah. It helps me make sense of the world.
It helps you make sense of the world. What does that bring for you?
Yeah. Yeah. So like a lot of my songwriting is it's very visual. It's very much around like interpreting a system and of like interpreting nature and then tying that into a relationship and how those things are very similar or connected in some way, shape, or form, and then telling a story within that context. That's how it, and then it represents itself in a musical phrase or lyrics or something like that. It's very much poetic in that manner.
So making sense of the world, does that bring you joy or peace, or is it
yes. Yeah, I would say when I get it out and it's gone and I've put it out into the world, then I can breathe easier.
You can breathe.
That's how I would describe it. Right.
Okay. Right. We're just that's what for you is I'm breathing easier. Let's just leave it at that.
Okay. Sounds good.
So what you do on the inside, connecting the dots, is your most compelling internal self-motivator. Like I mentioned, that's the thing that makes you tick. And why it's so meaningful is kind of that freedom of speech and that huge, I've connected connecting the dots, but just on a much grander scale, right? It looks like you've got two levels of connecting the dots with actually playing the music and then actually tying it together in a song that brings you that, right? And so that's what I call a flow strategy, knowing what you do on the inside and why it's so meaningful. Because when you can define what that is for yourself, this is the part that you can now repeat. Okay. So I wonder if you now think about your work, are you a dot connector?
Yes.
When you're doing your work?
Yes. When I'm doing the work I enjoy within my job, yes.
Yes.
For the most part, yes.
Yes, you're the dot connector, right? And do you have that sense of, right, that you were mentioning, of making sense of things?
Yeah.
There it is.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So now that you've defined what that is for yourself, and you see how unique you are, right? I've walked a lot of people through figuring out their flow strategy. Never had one like yours. Okay. And this is why I think I love teaching HR professionals these steps because not only can you use it for yourself, but you now have a system you can walk other people through figuring out how do they deeply engage? How can you now apply that to your work? Because I think just because you defined it, you're going to be able to wait a minute. I'm not going to just dive into this project right now. Let me just pause for a second and think, how can I connect the dots? How can I make sense of this?
Fascinating. Okay. Well, now I'm like soul-searingly questioning my existence. So, I don't know where to take the podcast from here. Now I'm just like, I'm just wrapped around what this looks like. So, we're gonna play the music where it's like, please hold, host
While you process, that was a lot to process for you.
Yeah, but I think this speaks to, and I'm sure that there are many listeners that are kind of went through this exercise and are thinking, yeah, certainly where my head goes with this is I'm reflecting on, well, all of these situations or scenarios where, I did get to, in my case, connect the dots, and I felt some sense of relief or your proverbial kind of light bulb moment where you do hit into a vein of something that's like bigger than you, or you feel like you're doing something that does line up, those three dots, the purpose, the skill, and the challenge.
Yes.
And you feel like you're like, for lack of a better term, you're like in the slot, you're there
in the zone, right?
In the zone, you're feeling it. And so really so really powerful exercise. Thank you for sharing that. And a lot to unpack there. I don't really know.
But I think that a lot. Let me tie the bow around it. Okay.
All right. Yeah, Diane, just take over the podcast because I'm just going to sit back and I got to reflect on this one.
Bottom line, in a world of doing, okay, in a world of doing, the real question is, have we lost out on the importance of being? And a lot of times when people are in their flow state, they describe it as, I really love what I'm doing. It's not like I'm doing. It's just like I'm being. Right. And so when you have, especially when you have purpose involved, right? It does take you to a different dimension. And so when you have people that are washing fish that aren't connecting, how could they be differently while they're doing that job, right? How can people uniquely engage in a way that is just so juicy for them, right? And then you can just imagine, just by being in their flow state, everyone around them is going to sense it. We already went through the mechanics of that, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I would kind of put a bow around it. Really, how can we help people to be in a world of doing?
I love it. I'm going to leave it right there, and we could go through the Rebel HR flash round. But I want the audience to reflect on, this is a pretty powerful tool, and I think a really powerful statement, and I think we should all reflect on it. I am going to encourage everybody to click into the show notes, check out the book, Flow, Unlock Your Genius, Love What You Do. It's available now. With that, Diane, I want to give you an opportunity to let people find out where they can connect with you, where they can learn more, and where best to find the book.
Yeah. It's easy to find it on Amazon. If you just go to Diane Allen and Flow, it usually pops up. I just want everybody to know that there's a lot more in the book than we just talked about. And there's a flow strategy worksheet in there. There's that Venn diagram. Everything that we talked about is in the book, as well as with a lot of stories of how to, different people implemented it, and as well as instruction. I'm a teacher at heart. I can't help it. But I also have a cheat sheet at tinyurl.com/flowstategift. On this webpage, I have It's basically like the cliff notes of everything we talked about, as well as a couple of videos that help to, take everything that we talked about to another level. And that's just a free gift for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Diane. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and insight with us today. Really great content, and I can't wait to hear the audience response. Thank you.
Thank you.
I love it.
Thanks for editing.
Thank God for editing. All good. Thanks, Diane. Take care. All right, that does it for the Rebel HR podcast. Big thank you to our guests. Follow us on Facebook at Rebel HR Podcast, Twitter at Rebel HR Guy, or see our website at rebelhumanresources.com. The views and opinions expressed by Rebel HR Podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any of the organizations that we represent. No animals were harmed during the filming of this podcast.